6:02 p.m. Clerk Segris, can you please do roll call?
All right, Warninski.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let the record reflect that Clerk Segris is in attendance, and Treasurer Slavens is absent. Trustee Snyderman.
I am present.
Thank you. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I just want to let everybody know we are going to go into closed session. So the regular board meeting starts at 7, but we will be in closed session for approximately an hour, and then we will come back to the regular board meetings. So can I have a motion to go into closed session, please?
Are we adding a second item?
Not that I know, no.
Okay.
No.
Madam Supervisor, I move that the board go into closed session for an update on union negotiations.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Snyderman. All those in favor say aye.
I think
Aye.
roll
Aye.
call.
Roll call on that one.
All right. Borninski.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Ganguly.
Aye.
Graham-Hudek.
Aye.
Segrist, aye. Snyderman.
Aye.
Great.
And then do we want to do the second one also? Do we have to announce the second one? Because we have two closed sessions.
I had asked you if we had to.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. I thought you meant this
That's not on the, okay.
updated one.
Madam Supervisor, I move that the board go into closed session additionally to consult with our attorney regarding settlement strategy in connection with specific pending litigation, Hunter v. Canton Township. And I will do a roll on that. Borninski.
I'll support it.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Snyderman.
Borninski.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Ganguly.
Aye.
Graham-Hudek.
Aye.
Segrist, aye. Snyderman.
Aye.
All right.
All right, thank you. We'll be back in 1 hour. Okay, can I have a motion to come out of closed session, please?
So moved.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Snyderman. Can I have all in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The next item is the adoption of the agenda and to move items C4, C7, and C9 to the general calendar for general discussion as G7, G8, and G9.
So moved.
Motion made by Clerk Segers, supported by Trustee Snyderman. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The next item is public comment on agenda items only. This is going to be 3 minutes for each person. There's no yielding of time. Your time is your own. So I will put a clock up and everybody can watch their time, but this is for agenda items only. We will have general public comment at the end of business. So I will start with those in the room. Who would like to stand up, please, and give general comment at the podium? Let me share my clock here. Hang on a second, please.
Hi, I'm Julie Delsis. I live at 7680 Thornwood Street with regards to the Blessings parcel rezoning. We might look small in the room today, but I do want to just remind the board that at the public hearing, this room was so full, it was standing room only. But those of us that are here are representing the 72 members of our neighborhood that are on our Facebook group and the over 100 individuals that are on our email chain that have provided feedback to us to present at today's meeting and are also anxiously awaiting your decision today. As you guys know, the Planning Commission unanimously vetoed the decision to rezone and put forth findings of fact that there were 5 criteria that were not consistent with the rezoning. We also just want to remind the board that FEMA has mapped the natural water courses and identified floodplain areas specifically for this area as regard to Fellows Creek. We also had Friends of the Rouge present. We also have a member of Friends of the Rouge here today talking about the unique topography and increased risk of flooding, as well as an insurance agent that lives in our neighborhood who's presented twice the potential liability for class action lawsuits if flooding were to increase and potentially decrease the home values in the area. We also just want to remind the board that a neighbor had also presented soil samples that were consistent with wetlands and also deemed the area not buildable for certain parts of the land, as well as not suitable for basements on any portion of the land. And the Canton website also praises the Fellows Creek wetland, which runs through this property, claiming that it improves water quality, stabilizes stream banks, reduces pollutants entering the Rouge River, and provides fish and wildlife habitat. But the biggest thing is that we just want to remind the board that the rezoning this outside of rural residential would not keep it consistent with the current zoning of the area and the surrounding areas, which are currently zoned RR. And to rezone this to R1 would take away Canton's ability to be consistent with being diverse and meeting the needs of the citizens who are looking for both densely and rural populated areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Teresa Savage, and I live at 3976 Napier Road. Back in March, the Planning Commission unanimously voted no on rezoning to the Blessing property to R1. They said the vote was a no-brainer. Then in April, the board provided additional findings of fact and told the Planning Commission to think about the rezoning more. The Planning Commission took 3 months to think about it. Then in July, they listed and explained in detail why the proposed rezoning did not meet 5 out of the 10 standards of review, specifically number 4, number 6, number 7, number 8, and number 9. From my understanding, the rezoning should not take place if the proposal doesn't meet even 1 out of the 10 standards of review. In this case, the proposal doesn't meet 5 out of the 10. Let me repeat that. The proposal doesn't meet 5 out of the 10 standards of review. Tonight, the board has the final vote on the Blessing rezoning. The Planning Commission has done their due diligence, and it should be a foregone conclusion that the board will also vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Kevin Vaughn, and I live at 49780 Hanford Road. Yeah, I'm not sure how the vote's going to go tonight. I don't know if it's going to be something I'm happy with or not happy with, but I know that you've all put a lot of time and effort into this, and that we have been well heard. And I know you said you're not going to answer questions, but I'm going to ask one anyway. What would be the next step? You know, let's say we're happy and everything's fine. Could the other side, could this go to court? Could this go to appeal? Could there be more legal action? Could this be tried again? Is this really the final decision made tonight by you, or is there something thereafter? It's kind of what I'm trying to find out, and like I say, no matter how that vote goes, I'm sure either side's going to want to do something next. Thank you.
Next, please.
My name is Alan Van Kerkhove. I'm a member of Friends of the Rouge, and I'm a citizen of Canton. It's 44710 Heather Lane, and I live in the Rouge watershed. I live in a flatter area downstream from the hilly area, which is the very northwest corner of Canton. I call it the moraine area, okay, glacier moraine area. And I already, I guess back in March, at the planning meeting, I said I'm against the rezoning. In fact, it's better that it be zoned R5 instead of R1 instead of going the other way. Because the way things have been done in the past on developments, it's just always additional runoff comes from these developments. It's not, in fact, it's an area where you don't worry about, oh, is it going to flood up? No, you're worried about how much water a development runs off. And guess where it flattens out? In the flat areas, Westland, the flat area of Canton, et cetera. And it's additional flooding for those people. So I decided between March and now, I was going to look at the other subdivisions. This is a very northwest corner. It only involves one section of Canton. The rest of Canton's in the Glacier Lake Plain. It's all flat. So this area is hilly. So I looked at 2 other subdivisions. And I looked at the one on Joy. The entrance is on the south side of Joy, of course. No, north side. I'm sorry, south side. and between Ridge and Napier. And I went in there, and they had one big, huge retention pond. It was algae and everything in it. They didn't do anything else other than that. In fact, they put houses wherever they could. They even have some stilts that 1 story tall. They have their patio, and it's 1 story up because they built houses wherever they could. Then I went into the subdivision that's on Warren, just east of this area that we're discussing now, between Ridge and Napier. They had grow zones. They had multiple retention basins. And grow zones, I mean natural areas. Well, let's let the water collect in there in a natural area. And of course, they had retention basins, which is required. And they had bioswale. They have a double basin where it dumped into a certain area, a sheet flow would come down in a certain natural area, would have cattails in that, and it would overflow to another basin. So they did a lot more. I don't know if I wouldn't say it's necessarily enough, but you have to do something to keep the water there. Not only slow down the flow, but maximize getting it into the ground. So not all developments are alike.
Thank you. Time's up.
Okay,
Thank you.
and
Thank you
we
very
don't have
much.
for our protection, for citizens'
Thank you, sir.
protection.
Can we please have somebody else? Sorry.
I know, but
You
we
can talk
don't
to us
have
after
the,
meeting
we
also.
don't have the, come on, the building codes.
Can I have
protect-
someone who's next, please? Next? Anyone else in the room?
My name is Beth Vaughn. I live on Hanford Road between Ridge and Napier. And as many of us are here today, anxiously awaiting the outcome, we're not just awaiting the outcome because we want to see lots of trees. We're awaiting the outcome because we're worried about next spring or the following spring or the following summer. We're worried about more flooding. We're worried about more traffic, 60-plus cars if this proposed development goes through on a hilly road, as opposed to 5 or 6 houses that are built there, as the current zoning suggests, which would bring, 12 cars maybe, 13 cars, as opposed to 60, 65 cars maybe. We're tired. We're tired of burnt-out sump pumps in our basement. We're tired of soggy yards that you can't mow because our creeks and our water that surrounds our land is just too high right now. We're tired of improvements made to roadways, and those improvements create a hazard and a deadly situation, which is what we have now on Ridge Road and Hanford. You can't turn left, you can't turn right. God forbid if you turn the corner onto Hanford and somebody's walking or somebody's parked their car, you can't see. These are all improvements, and I'm using quotes, that were made in the interest of making things better. Yes, maybe it did make things better for some people, but clearly there was a problem that was done with the road, just like there's a problem that was done with the subdivision behind my home, where I have flooding in my yard, and we have no recourse. It's done. We're trying to prevent what has already happened in the area, and we implore you to follow the Planning Commission's twice denial of the rezoning. Thank you.
Next, please. Next, please, in the room? Anyone in the room? No? Let me check online. Oh, come on. I have to stop the share. Okay, I'm looking online. Does anyone have anything on the agenda to speak of for this public comment? Remember, again, general public comment is at the end. Anyone online Anyone online speaking for the general agenda? Okay, 1, 2, nobody. I don't see any comments online. No hands. You can raise your hand just by pressing something on your Zoom link. Okay? I don't see any. Okay. Any other comments in the room? All right, great. Thank you. Public comment is closed on the agenda items. Oh, okay.
My name's Joseph Abdullah. I'm a homeowner at 7645 Thornwood. And I want to speak on behalf of my neighbors as someone who has unfortunately lived through this. And in 2014, we bought a home. There was a vacant lot next to our home on Thornwood. And one builder came in to what was designated wetlands at 8 o'clock at night with a tractor, a bulldozer, and bulldozed all those wetlands out. Subsequently, tractor-trailer loads of fill were brought in, and that property was 10 feet higher than my property. All kinds of nonsense went on, and my property began to flood. And I think when we just say the word flood, we don't really realize how difficult and how debilitating that can be to people. We had 4 to 6 inches of water that we had to slog through to get to our cars to go to work every day. And your building department will not be able to keep up with Pulte coming in and planning on doing what they're proposing to do. And it's not a matter of if this is going to happen. I can guarantee you this is going to happen. You can't go into these areas where we are, where we live, and change the topography and you know, not cause the damage that this does. I've lived it. I'm asking the board to follow the previous board's advice on not to go forward with this and not to allow this change. This is not Pulte Township. It doesn't belong to Pulte. The owners can sell their property, they should sell their property, but it's zoned a certain way for a certain reason. It needs to stay that way. So these people don't go through what I had to go through. It was horrible and expensive. And Pulte has lawyers. And if we get into litigation, this will go on forever, and you know, they're not going to be able to fight this for years and years and years. You have an opportunity to safeguard them. I didn't have that. I didn't have people having my back, and it hurt. It hurts to this day. I'm still paying for it. I'm still paying for it. But this is an opportunity to not let this happen. This area belongs to these people, it belongs to us, and it needs to stay that way. I mean, this is not so Pulte can have millions and millions of dollars more. This is about their lives, their homes, our well-being. And if this change happens, it's going to be a mess. I can guarantee you that, because I'm the only one, unfortunately, in this room who's had to live through it with one builder and one house, not 35. I can't even imagine what that would be. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, great. Go on to the next agenda item. Can I have a motion to pay the bills, please?
So moved.
Support.
By Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Brunensky. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. The next item is the consent calendar.
Madam Supervisor, I move that the board approve the consent calendar as presented. Item C1, consider awarding the contract for building automation controls throughout the township facilities. C2, consider awarding a contract for interior renovations at the Summit on the Park pursuant to the 2019 Capital Improvement Plan. C3, consider a request to increase a blanket purchase order for the fire uniforms. C5, consider approving a one-year software subscription renewal for LEFTA, or LEFTA, for police. Item C6, consider approving a 3-year software subscription renewal for Clear Profilex. And item C8, consider approving the purchase of Motorola Dispatch Radio Console equipment.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Snyderman. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Consent calendar passes. All right, the next is the general calendar. The first item is item G1, consider amendment to Appendix A zoning of the Code of Ordinances regarding blessing rezoning.
Madam Supervisor, I move that the board approve, wait, we have two motions.
Yes, so there,
So you want me to make a motion?
no, you're right.
I'll
So,
do it.
no,
Got my
I think it's
reasons.
okay to make a motion.
make a motion.
Madam
and then we can-
Supervisor, I move that the board disprove the Planning Commission's recommendation, or I'm
Mike.
sorry,
Mike,
approve the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the rezoning of parcel numbers, subject parcel numbers from RR rural residential to R1 single-family residential based upon the record and findings of the Planning Commission from the deliberations at the March 7, 2022 and July 25th, 2022 Planning Commission meetings on this request and facts, findings, and records of the September 23rd, 2022 Board of Trustees meetings.
support?
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Snyderman. Director Smith, do you want to make any comments?
I have no comments to make.
Okay, so, thank you. The applicant proposes to rezone parcel 71-026-99-000-3000, located on the south side of Warren Road and east side of Napier Road from RR Rural Residential to R1 Single Family Residential. The subject parcel is 31.5 acres and shaped like a backwards L. Although the parcel is connected to both Warren Road and Napier Road, it is not a corner parcel. If the rezoning is approved, the owner's representative intends to submit a plan for detached single-family residential development on the site. At its meeting on March 7, 2022, the Planning Commission held a public hearing and voted 6-0 to recommend denial of the application. However, the Planning Commission's motion did not include any findings of fact, including, but not limited to, the required review considerations of Section 2706D4 of the zoning ordinance. Therefore, at its April 12, 2022, the Township Board of Trustees remanded the application back to the Planning Commission for further findings. At its meeting on July 25, 2022, the Planning Commission received public comment and voted 7-0 to recommend denial of the application. The Planning Commission's motion to recommend denial of findings of fact in accordance with Section 2706D4 of the zoning ordinance. Trustee Foster, do you want to add anything based on the last commission meeting you were at?
Nothing to add. I think we are all very familiar with this application at this point.
Okay, thank you. In here, we also have Sarah. She's our legal representative for this, Sarah Gavis, so she can help us walk through this. So there's a couple of things I suggest that we do. We can have a general discussion and then walk through point by point before we make our motion. Okay, so you want to start that way? All right, so, okay, go ahead. Clerk
So-
Segrist.
Typically, from a parliamentary standpoint, the clerk always makes the motion, and so we suspend Robert's Rules of Order, and I don't necessarily have to support all of the motions that I make. But this is the rare instance where I get to actually decide which resolution to make. Because we had two model resolutions, and the reason I chose to start off with agreeing with the Planning Commission and denying the request for rezoning is, this parcel in particular has a long history in Canton Township, and when I went through the 10 standards, and while I respect the recommendation from the Planning Commission, or from the Planning Department initially, I do believe once you run it through the standards, it's important to not rezone that parcel and to keep the standards as they are. And I'll start with standard number 1. I don't believe,
Well, we can step through those separately as a group, unless, versus everybody doing it separate. You're going to do it all of them right now?
I mean, I don't know. What would you like me to say?
Just a general discussion, and then we can go through one by one and have everybody comment on each one that way.
Okay, so my general discussion is this, essentially. It's the purpose of the land ordinance to do a number of things, and one of which is to handle inappropriate overcrowding of land and congestion of population. I spent a substantial amount of time going through the historic documents in Canton Township, and In both 1978 and 1981, because it's me and I like to do walks through history, there was an attempt to put all farmland into a preservation district, and they put a tax before the voters in 78. And it failed by 500 votes, and it would have preserved 500 acres of farmland. And they put it before the voters again in 81, and it failed again, by a much larger number. And the reason was because there was a tax associated with it. And but nobody could have foreseen that what would happen west of Canton Center is that the township would kind of lose a substantial amount of its rural character. We have preserved our rural character in certain portions of the township. This is one of those portions, and it's reflected in the zoning, rural residential. Where it changed, and the change was somewhat recently, is in the future land use map. And Canton Township has recently, the board has recently, for the first time ever, taken over the approval of the future land use map. That was something we in the past had delegated to the Planning Commission. And I believe that this section of Section 7 of the township is appropriate to be listed on the future land use map as rural residential, consistent with the underlying zoning that exists there. And I think that there was an error in changing that in 2017 when the Planning Commission did that. And I would hope that, since we're going through the 5-year master plan, we would revert it back to rural residential zoning, or I'm sorry, for future land use map. So I think that's my general feelings about this. I do feel like the surrounding properties are all either rural residential or rural estate, which are non-residential designations. There is one adjacent parcel, which is across Warren Road. Warren Road is a fairly decent-sized buffer. Additionally, most of those residents are here today from that neighborhood. Pilgrim Hills Estates, I think is what it's called, and it was developed from the mid-50s to the early 60s and existed in a vacuum for literally 60 years. No creep of surrounding zoning. So I do not feel like it is consistent with the neighboring zoning standards that you would need to increase the zoning to R1. And at the time this neighborhood was built, the overall population of the township was about 51 to 5,500 people. And we're currently at 98,000. On top of that, I am concerned about the fact that as we have approved C1 zoning throughout the township, requests for paving of roads hit this body. We spend a substantial amount of time lobbying the county for funds to pave additional roads. We passed a roads millage to try to fix the existing roads that we currently have. And additionally, we often, once we've paved a road, are then required, or we are asked by residents to do a speed study to see if it's warranted to reduce the speed limit because people now drive faster, or to put in additional traffic calming measures, or look for more signals. And all of this is more Act 51 money and more township resources and county resources and MDOT resources. And so I don't think it's necessarily consistent with the overall, I think there's an adverse impact to public utilities in that sense, or public good. Additionally, a substantial amount of the township was developed prior to the Clean Water Act, and the Clean Water Act forced the state to change how we handle stormwater runoff. And luckily, all development since then has had some semblance of a detention or a retention component, but it's not 100% of the stormwater. Water still makes its way into the storm drain, and we are bad corporate citizens. Being on this end of the Fellows Creek, we are pushing a substantial amount of stormwater. We have seen in 2017, we had people come to this body because they are seeing banking encroachment. They're losing parts of their property to the Fellows Creek. It is inching closer to their home. You see stormwater displaced further down the Fellows Creek, and it makes its way all the way into the Rouge Shed. And we are dumping all of that water into Wayne, Inkster, Romulus, Dearborn Heights. It is a problem, especially as climate changes. It just gets worse and it gets exacerbated. And the county ordinance is great. It's a great standard for building, but it doesn't handle 100% of the stormwater. And so I do think that when we look through all 10, and I know you didn't want me to go through all 10, but I'm trying to objectively roundabout talk about all 10 of these criteria, I do believe that we have to think about this development and how it would impact that and how it could be used, because in the northwest section of, in the northwest quarter of Section 7, there is no R1 development. And there's only 2 R1 developments in the entirety of Section 7 of the township. And so I don't think there's a trend. I think the fact that the only adjacent C1, or I'm sorry, R1, not C1, I said C1 earlier, R1 I meant. I would like to change my earlier statements. The only existing R1, which is the neighborhood across Warren Road, had existed in a vacuum for 60 years. And so to say that that's the trend for this area would, I believe, be a logical fallacy. So I would actually argue that you could probably knock down all 10 of the criteria before us, but I wasn't asked to do that.
We will in a minute, definitely. Thank you. Tanya, do you have anything to say? Anything in general conversation? Can we also put the map up? Do we have the map of the zoning map at all? Are we able to do that while we're talking? Tanya, do you have anything?
I live very close to that area, and I am looking at I looked at the maps considerably the last week and this week. I was not present at the last meeting because of COVID. But I definitely have concerns because with the climate change that's going on, that, there is considerable amount of flooding that has happened in the last couple of few years, and this is going to go up. So I just want to understand if there is like an option in the middle, or if we don't do anything at all. It's okay to retain the green space that we have. So I just want to have a discussion about this, but I just live very close to the area and have driven by that area, and yeah, there's hills, there's considerable amount of water, tributaries over there. So just have a discussion on this.
Summer?
So when this initially came before the Planning Commission earlier this year, a lot of the residents spoke out and were very concerned about the impact that this development would have on the infrastructure in their community, and the preservation of green space, and the impact to the environment with flooding. And, I shared their concerns. I continue to have those concerns. I know, Madam Supervisor, at some point we're going to go through the rezoning criteria, but I still have the same concerns that I had when this initially came before the Planning Commission. And so interested in the input in the fellow trustees up here, but yeah, still have the same concerns.
Stephen?
Sure. I knew Michael would say it all very well. I think we did indicate last time in our public comment, when it came to us the last time, that we are a board that's very pro-environment. And to the extent of our ability and extent to what we can do under the law, we like to preserve trees and preserve nature and wild animals, wildlife. And so I think at sometimes we need to stand up and take a stand and say, we're going to draw a line here. And from what I read of the criteria, I see several, if not most, that can be made in terms of voting against the rezoning, voting for upholding the Planning Commission. I do want to say that our planning department does a great job. I think it was alluded to. And the question to them is how to do it if it could be done, not should it be done. And that's our responsibility. And so I think from my perspective, it sounds like I'm hearing from others on the podium that I am against this rezoning, and I would like to see us pursue that. Now, as far as what the next steps are, I was wondering if we could ask Sarah, just for the board members, so we understand what the next steps are based on either alternative, I guess, because it's not a done deal yet, how the vote's going to go tonight, but what would happen?
So depending on how the board votes tonight, it will either be to adopt the recommendation of the Planning Commission or to reject the recommendation of the Planning Commission. If you adopt the recommendation of the Planning Commission, then your work is done at this point unless there is an appeal. If you reject the recommendation of the Planning Commission and allow the rezoning to go forward, then it will go through Patrick's office to determine what the next steps are in terms of what type of development is proposed. And at that point, it may or may not come back before you, depending on what is proposed. For instance, if it's a PDD that's proposed, it may come back before you. If it's just a permitted use, then it may not come back before you. So it just kind of depends on what type of development is then proposed.
Thank you. In terms of the zoning map, I'm in agreement with what the clerk was discussing. Really the only R1 I see in the area is to the north. And thank you, Michael, for the history on that. From my own visual, cues of walking that neighborhood and riding a bike through that neighborhood, it's a far different neighborhood than would ever be built today by our developers. It's not something that I think is comparable to, if Pulte had come in and maybe said, I'm going to build something that looks like that, maybe we'd be having a different discussion. But we know it from the history of what's been built here in recent years in our community. I don't see that as something that is a trend in any way. And then in terms of the environmental, I am concerned about flooding. I actually live on Fellows Creek. I see the water rise, and in recent years, it has risen far more often and far greater than it has before. In my 27 years living in this community. So, yeah, I personally am interested in going through the 10 items and discussing them before we vote, but then I'm pretty sure my vote is going to be to uphold the Planning Commission.
Kate?
So I agree with pretty much everything that's been said so far. I did a lot of research on this, made several phone calls, and have looked at different maps, including the zoning map and the future land use map. But, nothing I saw there led me to believe that there was a reason to go against what the Planning Commission has recommended. I, too, am concerned about the environmental impact of this. My own backyard floods if there's a heavy rain, and we've had mitigating things done to try to help that, but it doesn't. It still floods. And I don't live in that area of the township, but my understanding is looking at the current master plan, which is going to be updated or completely revised, that is a watershed for Fellows Creek and the area that we're talking about rezoning. And as we all know, Fellows Creek empties into the Rouge, and the Rouge affects not just Canton, but areas downstream. So I think, we've already seen issues in the last few years with what we call 100-year floods, but they seem to be coming more often. So I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the loss of trees, which, as we all know, trees take carbon from the atmosphere. So this is one of the areas of the township that actually has a nice bit of trees. I think it's called, I'm looking, Central Hardwood and Oak. So that's looking at the map in the current master plan. The other thing too is that since we are going through the process of updating the master plan, I think that to rezone this before going through that process would not be something that I would be in favor of doing.
So before we go, I think it's very important that we thoroughly go through every one of the points. But I just want to say before that, we also have to remember that this is private land owned by the Blessing family. I know a lot of people like to say Pulte, but this is private land. And the Blessing family is asking through Pulte, for it to be rezoned. And they do have a right to petition for that rezoning also, based on our ordinance. I also want to say that this is just rezoning. I mean, anything, you can make assumptions about what would happen, but when a site plan comes forward, that's when Eagle gets involved, the state gets involved, the county gets involved, and will basically say what can and cannot be done. So what we are looking at tonight is a zoning. We can make assumptions about what would happen or what we would like to happen, but this is just a rezoning. Unfortunately, also we have our tree ordinance. The Canton tree ordinance is under attack by a local company and an interest group from Texas. So while we like to say what we want to do, in the end, the board will make a decision, and what the Blessing family decides to do, we'll see where that goes. But unfortunately, we do try to save our trees in Canton, and we are having difficulty with that because of the federal courts. Also, right now, the master plan is being updated. So this is also the timing is interesting because this is a time when you open up the master plan and you decide what you will zone or not zone. So looking at this map up here, you can see the site, and my personal question is, we're moving from RR and RE on the other side, and do we want to go stark to an R1? Or can we look at zoning at RE also? So why do we go from RR to R1? So we don't know what will happen after our decision. However, that is a consideration we should take into consideration also. Do we want to go from RR to R1 or have a transitional zoning there? And that's also going to be discussed with our advisory board moving forward after the end of this year. So with the help of Sarah, I'd like to have the group go through each point one by one. You can make comment on each point, but we just want to be very thorough that instead of just saying we agree with the Planning Commission, I think it's important that we go through each of these points also as a team and decide what we want to do. So starting with the first one, for Section 2706 of the zoning ordinance, will the proposed amendment be in accordance with the basic intent and purpose of the zoning ordinance? Anyone want to comment on that? We can go through the same. Michael, go ahead.
So when I was reading the purpose, which is Section 1.02 of the Appendix A Land Use Ordinance, inside that very large paragraph, I saw that part of the purpose of our zoning ordinance is to limit the inappropriate overcrowding of land and congestion of population. And so when I look at an RR site right here, essentially landlocked by Warren Road, surrounded by RR, it feels to me like going to R1 is somewhat an inappropriate overcrowding, and that a better use would potentially be if we're going to do anything to go to an RE or rural estate, that feels more consistent with the purpose of the zoning ordinance. So I would argue, or I believe, that the proposed amendment does not meet standard one, because I believe the purpose of, that's in the purpose of the zoning ordinance. And so I'm just looking at the specific language of the zoning ordinance itself in the purpose. I don't know, Sarah, if you feel like that's inappropriate or not, but I know it's our ordinance. I mean, we vote on the ordinance, but.
Yeah, no, I think you've made an appropriate comment as it relates to the purpose of the ordinance. I think that it relates, and that is the purpose of this exercise, is to go through each one of these and relate it to the
Thank you.
appropriate sections of the ordinance.
Stephen?
I agree with the clerk, but I wanted to add that I also think the purpose of the ordinance would also equally make the case for having it remain at RR. So I don't want the last word to be that RE is a definite possibility. I wanted to ensure that RR is equally as much, if not more, a possibility, so.
Thank you. Point well taken.
Kate?
And I agree with Stephen on that.
Summer? Tanya, sorry, go ahead.
I agree with Stephen on that too, that because it's mostly RR. Yeah, RE could be an option, but, most of the land around it is RR. So I think that it could be a possibility, a bigger possibility than an RE.
Summer?
And
Okay, thank you. And I think I made a comment on that one, that as we said, I'd like to look at for more transitional versus a stark RR to R1. The next one, is the proposed amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan of the township? I'll start with Tanya. Do you have any quick comments on that?
So, we are working on a master plan right now, and this is probably the right time to consider what we want to keep as green spaces, because as a board, our priority has been to work on sustainability, being friendly to the environment. So, this is a good time to, maybe this is the future, that we need to keep some land around us that's not developed into R1.
Summer? Anything?
I don't have any comment on criteria number 2.
Cool.
My comment on criteria number 2 is that unfortunately this is consistent with the future land use map, that it is listed as very low density residential. That said, in 2016, when the process was created for the 5-year master plan, the board delegated the responsibility for approving the future land use map to the Planning Commission. Then there was an election, and I was elected along with a number of other new people in 2016, and I was terrified to know that the Board of Trustees had no approval over the future land use map. And so I'm glad in this 5-year master plan process, since it's been 5 years, we have taken back that responsibility and can right that wrong, and I would hope that we change the future land use map or the comprehensive plan of the township for this area and revert it back to where it was prior to that Planning Commission changing it.
Stephen?
Same thing, I agree with everything the clerk just said. I just want to add that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the master plan or future land use map, which I believe is what they're talking about here when they mention comprehensive plan, allows it also to stay at RR, right? It's a range, I think, in the master plan. Michael, tell me if I'm wrong about that, or?
Look at me.
Yes, yep, Sarah
Okay.
can answer that,
Or
or
Sarah.
Jade or Patrick.
I would have to pull up the actual language of that provision, but I think either Patrick or Jade might know that exactly.
Yeah, thank you for going to Podium, Patrick.
Yeah, the future land use map classifies it as up to one dwelling unit per acre in that classification. So the corresponding zoning district is R1, but it's the up to 1 unit per acre. In the text of the master plan, although the 5-acre density classification was removed from the master plan in recent years, I think in 2016 or 2017, some of the text remains in the master plan. So it speaks to a 5-acre density in the master plan that's not there on the map. So when the map was amended, it was amended to take out all the 5-acre density, or I take that back, I think it was 2-acre density. It took out the 2-acre density from the map, but it didn't take the text out of the ordinance or out of the master plan. So that text is still there. There's just no corresponding future land use with it. It's, I think, an inconsistency between the text and the map in terms of when that update took place. But the way that the text is written, it's 1-acre density or up to 1 acre, but no more than 1 acre, no more than 1 unit per acre density.
So yeah, I agree with the clerk that it's the amendment as it was proposed is consistent with the plan, but it's not the only option for the plan.
Thank you, Kate. Anything else to add?
I have a question for Sarah, actually. So when we're talking about the future land use map, that doesn't mean like tomorrow or next month, right? It just means at some point in the future. It doesn't mean necessarily right now.
That's correct. So your future land use map is a guide for the township in determining where it wants to see future land uses go. It's not your zoning ordinance, which is sort of the law of the land. So you're correct in that it designates sort of what the township wants to see, but it is just a guide as well. So you don't, just because it says it in the master plan doesn't mean you have to do it. And it doesn't mean you have to do it at any particular time. But it is a guide that should, in an overall sense, guide the actions of the township moving into the future, if that makes sense.
Okay, but then there's the possibility, since we're going through the process of updating the master plan, that this future land use map could change.
That's true, yes.
So I guess, you know, I look at this and I think that, you know, like Patrick said, that the text didn't quite transfer to the map, but that the intent had been 5 acres for a lot, I guess. 2?
You might want to stay by the podium.
Okay. Anyway, what is written on the future land use map doesn't necessarily agree with what was put into the master plan in text. Is that correct, Patrick?
Yeah, I pulled up the master plan here, and there's a classification there that's called rural residential, and it's 1 dwelling per 2 acres for rural residential. And on the future land use map, the rural residential, I believe it's also in the legend itself, but there's no land that's there. So it's essentially in the text, it's on the legend of the map, but there's nothing in the map that got rid of the rural residential. So it's still there in the text, it's there in the legend, so it's there for the map to be changed where land can be changed to rural residential without having to necessarily change the text of that section or the legend of the map. But again, the map that states that it's 1 dwelling unit per acre, the map says 1 DU per acre, but the text says up to, it says not exceeding 1 dwelling unit per acre. So it gives a max density, it doesn't give a minimum density.
Okay. So I guess I don't necessarily disagree with the clerk or trustee Snyderman. I guess my thinking is when you say up to, then that also means that it could be lower than that.
Thank you. The next item, have conditions changed since the zoning ordinance was adopted, or was there a mistake in the zoning ordinance that justified the amendment? Let's start down with you, Kate, this time.
So I don't think there was a mistake, but I don't think any conditions have changed that I'm aware of.
Ben?
I agree with that. I don't see any conditions that have changed. They've been it's been pretty much the same out there for decades, so.
Michael?
I have seen no alterations to the facts and circumstances of our existence that justify the amendment.
Summer?
Okay, so I have a question on this one. Patrick, I went back and looked at the original considerations that you put forth to the Planning Commission back in March. And on this one, you said that, or staff, I don't know if it was you or someone else from your team, but conditions have changed since the zoning ordinance was adopted, as owners of the subject parcel desire to sell their property for the purposes of development in accordance with the master plan and zoning ordinance, and that the demand for single-family residential use continues in Canton Township, and the availability of large undeveloped parcels in the community is more scarce. And so the second part of that statement, is that related to this specific is it township-wide?
It's general in the township itself. We've seen both at the Planning Commission and at the board level where we have large undeveloped tracts of the township that are being developed, and we continue to see it even as we're the 9th largest community in Michigan, but we're also one of the fastest growing communities in Michigan, so we're still growing at a rapid pace. And so as we continue to see those, and in the coming months, we'll see additional development proposals on other tracts of land in the township. There's a township-wide demand. So that's more of a general statement in terms of large tracts of land throughout the entire township, not specific to any one area. And a follow-up review to the board and also to the Planning Commission, we did include some specific areas where we went into a little bit more depth about the surrounding area where we've seen developments such as Arbor Glen at the corner of Warren and Ridge, and Westchester, also at Warren and Ridge, but on the opposite corner, where there had been development over the last several years, and a large parcel west of Westchester that had been rezoned in recent years, where we did cite some recent examples of rezonings farther east of this parcel, not contiguous, but in the general vicinity in that northwest part of the township, where specifically there have been some proposals for rezoning and subsequently development. So it's kind of meant as both locally in terms of the cases, but also township-wide.
That's helpful. Yeah, I mean, I guess on this one, I don't think there was a mistake in the zoning ordinance, but I do think that things have changed since the ordinance was enacted.
Thank you. Tanya?
Yeah, I agree that, generally the township, when this ordinance was there in the 90s, and now the township has considerably changed, and this ordinance has changed, but this particular area has not changed at all. So it's kind of, they're not, they're on the opposite sides of things, but like both of them are true, that this area particularly has not changed, but the township as a whole is going towards being more dense and more land development.
Thank you. Next item, number 4. Will the amendment correct an inequitable situation created by the zoning ordinance rather than merely grant special privileges? I'll start with Summer. Number 4, what do you think? Okay, Michael.
I do not believe the amendment will correct any inequitable situation created by the zoning ordinance. I think it will, in particularly, just allow the Blessings to develop their property for a higher use, which does appear to be a special privilege that is inconsistent with the way that it is currently zoned.
Okay, thank you. Summer, did you find your?
Yes, so no, the amendment does not create an inequitable situation. The situation is equitable as it stands now.
Tanya?
I agree with both Summer and Michael.
Stephen?
I would add to that, I agree with that, and I would add that I believe that the issues, potential issues with water management could actually create an inequitable situation versus correcting one. So I think it's almost worse than it not correcting an inequitable situation. It's actually potentially creating one. So I believe it does not meet this one as well.
Kate?
Oh, Sarah, I have another question. Sorry. When we're looking at an inequitable situation, we're talking about surrounding zoning, is that right?
I think that's an element of it, yes.
Okay. Okay, so, I mean, if you look at the surrounding zoning, it's mostly RR, there's some RE, a little bit. So I think right now, it's equitable. So I don't think there is an inequitable situation.
Thank you. And I mean, my thoughts are, I haven't seen an inequitable situation, and we also have not seen a layout to determine if flooding would or would not occur. Those are only assumptions made. So that's basically my comment on that one. And the next one, will the amendment result in unlawful exclusionary zoning? Will the amendment set an inappropriate precedent resulting in the need to correct future planning mistakes? Start with Kate.
So, for this one, I think we're going to need Sarah's help. My understanding is that exclusionary zoning, first of all, it's unlawful, but there has to be that there's no demonstrated need, right? That's what we're looking at, is a demonstrated need.
Yeah, I don't really think, I mean, if, of all of the standards here that really kind of don't apply to this development, it's probably number 5, because there really is no issue. This isn't like someone requesting a mobile home park and there isn't a mobile home park in the township or something like that. There's plenty of residential in the township. This isn't, this doesn't really apply. You could almost say not applicable for this particular standard, as long as you've talked about it and considered it.
Okay.
Actually, that's probably, we were saying, that's probably two different items, correct? Will the amendment result in unlawful exclusionary zoning? The next one, will the amendment set an inappropriate precedent resulting in the need to correct future planning mistakes?
That's a different one.
Correct, yeah.
Anyone else want to comment that they think anything different than will the amendment result in unlawful exclusionary zoning?
So I would say no, because that's typically something that involves a regulated use, like a lot of times, like,
group home or something like that.
yeah, or like, so we currently have a sexual-oriented businesses policing ordinance, because it allows us to regulate them in a way that we couldn't do it through the zoning code, because we would potentially be participating in an exclusionary zoning by not allowing them, essentially, but we can regulate them stricter outside of the zoning ordinance through a different thing. So, but for question number 6, which you asked, which was, will the amendment set an inappropriate precedent resulting in the need to correct future planning mistakes? That was a question you had asked. So I would argue yes. I believe that the inappropriate precedent would be that all RR property as a result of this becoming R1, all the adjacent RR property would essentially require being upzoned to R1 upon request. So this would essentially obligate all future boards to approving every rezoning request. in the future. I mean, this is what we see with 99.9% of the development requests that come before this board. We are almost obligated to approve them because the conditions around them necessitate their approval. And this is one of the areas where that doesn't necessitate the approval, according to my opinion, and that is because of the adjacent RR and RE.
So Sarah, would that, I mean, so if we approved R1, does that mean surrounding owners could come and say, hey, that's a precedent and I want to make mine R1 also?
I mean, I think you could say either way, right? So if you, eventually, if you rezone this site and then someone else comes in and says, well, my adjacent property is also, or the property adjacent to me is R1, so now it's consistent with the master plan, you could find, the township could find itself in a position where it is zoning out the RR at some point. But there is no obligation. Rezoning is legislative and discretionary. So just because someone comes and asks you for a rezoning because the surrounding property is zoned consistent with what they're asking for, it doesn't mean you have to grant it, unless everything around it, and it's and it has become a spot zoned sort of area. So it could go either way. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to continue to rezone, but it becomes less defensible the more property becomes consistent around it, I guess, is my point.
I mean, because that was my point, is essentially, if we approve that, we essentially met 3 or 4 of the criteria we've already gone over for the adjacent properties. Now we've created an inequitable situation because we just approved an RR next door. Now we've just increased surrounding zoning for the next parcel. When you start going through the list, you create you start meeting these 10 criteria for every other adjacent parcel.
Does anyone else want to make comments on that part of it?
I will just say that I don't think that it creates unlawful exclusionary zoning, but on number 6, I agree wholeheartedly with Clerk Segrist, and I think that is actually one of the most important reasons to reject this rezoning.
Anyone else? Stephen?
I agree with the clerk, and Trustee Foster took my words. Basically, I think items 6 and 7 are probably the most applicable ones to why I see not approving this request for rezoning. Legal counsel, I hear what you're saying in terms of setting, or us being able to, even if precedent is set, us being able to reject in the future, but it doesn't deny that precedent would be, and what I believe is an inappropriate precedent would be set for that area, so.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that one? The next one is a rezoning is requested. Is the proposed zoning consistent with the existing land uses of surrounding property? Stephen, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I kind of said it. I believe this one is also the most appropriate one. It was not consistent, in my opinion. The request is not consistent with the surrounding property zoning.
Else on that one? Michael, go ahead.
I mean, what I wrote down is this area of the township is clearly objectively rural. The only adjacent property zone consistent with this rezoning has been in existence in a vacuum for 60 years. There is no developed R1 zoning in the northwest quarter of Section 7 of the township, and there are only 2 R1 developments in the entirety of Section 7, which was listed as RR on the future land use map until recently.
Thank you. Anyone else? Tanya, is your hand up? I can't tell.
Yeah, I think that, this is, as I agree with everyone, and if you're talking about, the R1 zoning that's happening, that is on the north side of Warren Road. Probably the only neighborhood that's R1, I think, is that Westchester, Patrick? That's next to RE over there. That's the only one that's in that vicinity, in that quadrant, which is a different zoning. Most of the zoning here is RR, so this is like probably the biggest reason that we agree with the planning commission's vote.
Yeah, I agree. When I was looking at the rezoning criteria, this one was definitely a no for me because, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer to me. Like, the only R1 that you could even make it, you know, that you could say was near it is across a major road. So.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on that one? Nope. The next one, if a rezoning is requested, could all requirements in the proposed zoning classification be complied with on the subject parcel? And I said, well, the site plan would definitely show the final, but. Anyone else?
All right, yeah, can we get clarification?
Be honest.
Yeah, that's a standard where, suppose it was something where it was a much smaller parcel, and there was a proposal to rezone it to a district, and depending on the standards of that district, it didn't meet the lot area, the lot frontage, or the setbacks. You could look at that parcel specifically and say, well, the zoning district you're asking for, this parcel can't comply with that district, so it's not appropriate for that zoning district. For larger parcels, that standard is usually met by default because theoretically it can be met, even if they rezone the site and decide to build one house. The bare minimum of the district standards can be met.
This is one that seems like it could be met, is what you're saying.
Yeah, by default, usually any parcel that's large and includes the proper frontage and area is met by default. It's one of the easier standards to meet, especially with a parcel of this size.
Does this standard exist to protect private property owners from a government coming in and essentially zoning their parcel inoperable? Is that what this is trying to do?
It would protect from, I guess, either the government or any applicant that wanted to push a rezoning. And among all the standards that are there, if somebody was proposing a rezoning, even if they tried to fit something in where, suppose they needed a modification or a variance or something else to meet the standard, somebody could always fall back on that standard and say, well, if in your development proposal, let's say you don't get approval for your variance or your modifications in your plan development, and you're dealing with just the parcel that's being zoned, can you meet the standards of that district and the underlying district? And if the answer is no, and that standard is not met, the zoning is usually not appropriate. There may be rare instances where it is, but that would be very site-specific and in a district-specific case.
Okay.
I want a little more clarification on this one from Sarah. And I guess what I'm wondering about is what if the parcel, it's like the parcel itself or the land to be rezoned itself is large enough, but what if some of the land is not able to be built upon?
So I think Patrick summed it up very well as it relates to a larger parcel. But you make a good point too, like if the topography of the land or if it's in a floodplain, and so even regardless of how big it is, you still couldn't even put one house on it because it exists in a floodplain or a regulated wetland or something like that, then it would not meet the standard. I don't think that really applies in this case. I think in this case, number 8 is probably met. It's not my purview to make those decisions for you, but I think in looking at it in terms of, number 8, and when I talked about the exclusionary zoning one, those ones are kind of no-brainers to me. It seems like absolutely they could meet the requirements of the district that they're zoning, or that they're requesting a rezoning for.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that one? Next one, number 9. If a rezoning is requested, is the proposed zoning consistent with the trends in land development in the general vicinity of the property in question? If the rezoning is requested. Okay. Any questions on that one? Comments?
I would say it absolutely changes the trend.
I would agree. I mean, this is the land, this is the land that time forgot over here, and to pretend like it's, you know, the area around Fellows Creek where you've got condominiums popping up, it just doesn't make any sense. This is an area, like I said, the only R1 development in this map has, you know, has been plotted in the 50s, in the 60s. So it just makes no sense that this would be a trend in this area. To me.
Anyone else? Summer or Tanya, or, nope? Okay. Last item, if a rezoning is requested, what is the impact on the township infrastructure? Now, we've seen, you know, it would be pulling from neighboring infrastructure. The infrastructure is not right at the property, but they would be pulling from the neighboring infrastructure. Any comments on that one? Summer?
I guess I would, you know, talk about the flooding that the residents have spoken out quite clearly about. And also the roads, there's that dirt road there. And I know having a child in the school system, we always have during the winter when there's a huge snow that sometimes school is canceled because they can't get the school buses through that route. And so, yes, it has an impact on our infrastructure, adding all of those residents to that part of the community. And so, yes.
Anyone else? Michael?
I would reiterate, what I said in the beginning, which is, you know, one of the public benefits of almost every PDD that we do on a dirt road for anything that is R1 or higher is they will come in and they will pave up to their entrance. And so the reason is because that's the desirability factor for people who are buying in R1 subdivisions or higher. They want, and that happens routinely. And so the existing infrastructure, which is Warren and Napier, both being dirt, is something that adding the additional traffic on there, creating the additional development, does create a situation where the temperament of the individuals moving into this area will no longer accept that they purchased on a dirt road, even though they intentionally purchased on a dirt road. So that's, I would say that the existing infrastructure of the roads are problematic when we approve this kind of zoning in this area. I will talk about the immediate ask, as we are seeing on Salt and on Ridge, for traffic studies, for traffic calming measures, for signaling and signage to control individuals who don't want to drive, who can now, without really any consequence, drive well over 45 miles an hour and do it safer than you could on Napier Road where there's potholes, which inadvertently are a traffic calming measure of themselves. So that's one. And then the other issue is, as long as we are not retaining and detaining 100% of stormwater, which we're not, and that's not the standard, but to that end, for this area, developing it will result in additional runoff water, and that runoff water will go into the system. And R1, or allowing 1 unit per acre, will increase the amount of stormwater runoff, which increases the amount of water in Fellows Creek, which negatively impacts a substantial amount of properties that are further down the county drain. That's a county drain. Whether or not we call it a creek, it's a county drain. Most creeks in Canton were developed by farmers to drain the property. And that's to push water downstream. And so, I will definitely argue that we all need to have a deeper, stronger conversation about what we're doing with stormwater runoff, especially if we're going to be seeing astronomical temperatures and astronomical rain events. We keep having, we've had 500-year floods in Michigan, which obviously doesn't mean that it only happened every 500 years, but there's a 1 in 500% or 1 in 500 chance of that flood happening. And we've had back-to-back 100-year floods over and over and over again. And we're acting as if we can continue to just go on like nothing's wrong. Something is wrong. And so for us to commit the same, I would say, mistakes of previous boards of allowing highest and best use of every single parcel and rezoning accordingly is problematic. And I think this is an area where we have the opportunity to not do that and to protect the existing stormwater or, county drain system and, again, the road system as well, because this is, I think, exactly why communities zone, to give them some semblance of control over their future. And it feels like it's been run away. I mean, it's been a runaway future for decades, so.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that one? Stephen?
Well said by both of them. I'll just add on the stormwater that this government and our county government is already working on issues within the storm water system, erosion that has occurred in this community and others downriver, and I don't think we should be adding to that. I don't know what percentage this would add to that, but it's obviously not something that's going to help that in any way. It's definitely going to hinder that work, and it's already identified as a very costly fix, and one that potentially our citizens will be paying for. So to go against that, to make that worse in a sense, I think we shouldn't be doing that.
Else, Kate?
Just, I agree wholeheartedly with the clerk, and especially what he said on stormwater, because if he didn't bring it up, I was going to.
Else on that one?
I agree with them.
Okay, thank you. No, I agree. In summer, is like you said, our buses don't get through some of those areas. So as supervisor, I thought it was important that we go through that, and I know that the board, this is a board that really cares about the beauty of the township and protecting our trees and land, and even though we're fighting it in courts with this group from Texas. But Sarah, could you help me? And we've gone through the 10 standards. Could you let me know the one that we said did not meet the standards of section 2706 D4 of the zoning ordinance based on what you heard?
So, yes, I think based on what I've heard, what I've heard from each of these standards is that 1 hasn't been met, 2 hasn't been met, 3 hasn't been met, 4 hasn't, 5 is sort of not applicable. 6, there was debate on both sides, I believe. 7, I believe, I mean, I don't want to re-articulate what you all have said on each one of these, because this is not my decision, this is your decision. But based on what I've heard from the majority of you, it sounds like number 7 has not been met. Number 8, I think, has been. Number 9, it sounds like it has not been met. I think the important thing, and there was a lot of discussion too about 10 with regard to paving and flooding and its impact on the infrastructure. I think the important thing is not so much what I believe has been met and has not been met, but that you have talked about every single one of these and deliberated every single one of these, which is the important part. So when you make your decision tonight, I think when you articulate, there's already been a motion articulated, but I think that in amending that motion or accepting a friendly amendment to that motion, that there should be certain findings of fact that you articulate as part of this motion, not just that you're accepting the recommendation of the Planning Commission, because you guys talked a lot more than the Planning Commission did. You went through each one of these standards and you articulated reasons for each one of them, whether it was for or against. And so I think it's important that your record reflects that. And when you articulate a motion, whoever it is that articulates it finally and whoever it is that offers those amendments, that you offer the amendments based on what standards you find to be most important in your decision. Doesn't have to be all of them, but the ones that you think are most important to your decision, whether it be for or against.
Thank you. So we can have Clerk Segris read the motion again, and we can articulate, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, and 10.
If from a parliamentary standpoint, I would just rather entertain a friendly amendment to my existing motion that we deny based on the fact that it does not meet standard 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, if that would be appropriate.
Any objections to that?
Someone's got to make
I
that
would make
friendly
that
amendment.
motion with 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10 as the pertinent considerations in making this decision tonight.
Support.
Motion made by Trustee Snyderman, supported by Trustee Borninski. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. This is
So that's a
for the
friendly amendment. It does
Okay.
not require a vote
Oh,
to an
okay.
existing motion.
Perfect.
Add that friendly amendment.
If I can I interject just
Yes,
real quick?
please.
So if you're going to articulate each one of these standards, I would give a reason. So I know it's cumbersome.
Can't use the reasons that we just gave.
Nope.
Well, those
can
were
do
your
it.
deliberations, so each one of you had your own thoughts and concerns about each one. So one person doesn't speak for the entire board, but your motion will speak for the entire board if it is adopted.
Okay.
So I would just, if you're going to rely on one, say why it didn't meet it. If you're going to
Okay,
rely
so
on
why-
two, say why it didn't.
Okay, so.
Or why it did. I'm sorry, I don't want to presume what your motion's going to be, but I
So
think
you-
it should be a little bit more articulated.
Okay. So
And
number.
one more thing too, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Sarah.
So your zoning ordinance requires the action by the township board to either be to adopt the proposed amendment or reject the proposed amendment, or to refer it back to the planning commission. You've already sort of done that referral back to the planning commission part. So tonight, it's not so much a motion to accept what the planning commission did or didn't do. You are either adopting or rejecting the rezoning amendment to
So I
the
think
zoning
we
ordinance.
need a new motion then.
So, Stephen, if you're okay with this, I would like to retract my motion, since you were the initial, well, A, you're the amender,
Yeah,
and B, you're
I'm
the
the
second. I will
second.
retract my initial motion that was
I
written,
agree.
listed in the RBA. And do you want me to give a stab at making a motion? After an hour and a half of discussion. Madam Supervisor, I move that the board reject the rezoning request based on the criteria, the failure to meet standard 1, that the proposed amendment is not in accordance with the basic intent of the purpose of the zoning ordinance, as the purpose of the zoning ordinance is to limit the inappropriate overcrowding and land and congestion of population in this region. Standard 2, that the proposed amendment is not consistent with the comprehensive plan of the township. As stated before, we are in the process of altering it. Additionally, there is inconsistencies between the letter of the plan and the map itself. Item C3, C3, standard 3, that conditions have not changed in this specific section of the township or in general as it relates to, and this is not fixing a mistake of the zoning ordinance. It doesn't justify the amendment. Standard 4, that it does not correct an inequitable situation created by the zoning ordinance, but would instead grant special privileges because there's a substantial amount of R1 development in the community, including the 199 houses for sale on Zillow right now. that are all single-family homes. Will the amendment result in unlawful exclusionary zoning? Does not apply. So we believe that standard 5 does not apply. Standard 6, the amendment sets an inappropriate precedent resulting in the need to correct future planning mistakes because this would essentially impact all of the rural residential properties in that area, tying the hands of future boards and literally setting a precedent. Standard 7, and this is where I was using the RBA numbers and you were using standards from,
Ordinance.
well, that looks like it's from Foster Swift, and so there's different questions you have than I have. Because I used the 10 that were in the RBA. So can I
Yes, that's what I was
see what
using.
you've got? Because that confused me. If a rezoning is requested, is the proposed zoning consistent with the existing land uses of the surrounding property? Okay, that is the same.
That's what I had.
So, no, so standard 7 doesn't exist for the same reasons that standard 6 is not met, essentially. The existing land uses of the surrounding property are substantially RR or RE and are inconsistent with the R1, specifically because of Warren Road. And item 8 it does meet, so we'll skip that one. Standard 9, if the rezoning is requested.
Impact on township infrastructure.
No, that's 10.
Trends.
Yeah, that was 10, so.
Consistent with trends.
Oh, consistent with trends in the vicinity. Again, the only R1 development is over 60 years old from what it's plotting, and so that is not the trend of this specific area.
Can you specifically say it would actually change the trend in the motion?
We believe that this would change the trend. And then items, standard 10, if a rezoning is requested, the impact on township infrastructure would be a detriment to existing roads and surface ground or surface stormwater runoff due to flooding.
Good. Longest motion in the world, made by Clerk Segrist. Can I have a
I'll
support?
support it.
Support by Trustee Snyderman. Do you want a roll call or a vote? Let's see. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Denied. Good stuff. All right. Next item on the board. Next item on the agenda, consider approval of a budget amendment and purchase order increase for parks fuels cost.
Madam Supervisor, I move to approve the attached budget amendment and increase the purchase order for the park's fuel expense.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Borninski. The Leisure Service Parks Division operates many vehicles to provide services for their daily work. Every year, a purchase order is submitted for gasoline to fuel these vehicles. With the continuous rising costs of fuel, the Leisure Services Department is recommending a budget amendment in the amount of $15,000 to increase purchase order 22546 for the park's fuel expenses. Director Holmberger, do you want to add anything?
I'd like to go point by point through this.
Denied.
No.
Nothing? Any questions for the board? Conversation? Nope. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Great. Item G3, consider approval of a budget amendment and purchase order for a laser projector.
Madam Supervisor, I move to approve the attached budget amendment and purchase order for California Media Solutions Incorporated at 4728 East 2nd Street, Suite 16, Benicia, California, at 94510, for the purchase of a laser projector in the amount of $13,495 to be paid from the account number listed for capital outlay machinery and equipment.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Borninski. On August 18, 2022, an invitation to bid was advertised for a laser projector to be used for outdoor movies and will be split among 5 municipalities, including Canton, South Lyon, Milford, Northville, and Novi. As a result of the ITB, 4 companies submitted bids with California Media Solutions Incorporated, providing the lowest bid in an amount of $13,495. Canton Leisure Services is recommending to purchase a laser projector from California Media Solutions, Inc. in the total amount of $13,495, with Canton's portion totaling $26,99. Director Holmberger, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, this is the second time that we'll be purchasing equipment under this intergovernmental agreement in partnership with other communities. It saves us on rental fees by purchasing this in cooperation with other agencies, and then we share the equipment, and it works out well for everyone. So we're looking forward to continuing this process.
Sounds a good project. Any questions or comments? Great. All those in favor, Kate?
So, Greg, I understand that there's, 5 communities that are going in together on this?
That's correct.
Have you done this before? I think you
Yes,
said.
yeah, this is our second
Has
time.
there ever been an issue with being able to get the equipment when you want it or need it?
No, we have a calendar where we each select our primary dates that we work together to, that's kind of it's in our IGA, what our primary dates are, and then any dates outside of that we want the equipment are on a first-come, first-served basis, and the equipment is primarily stored in Canton, so then we kind of have a little advantage in using that equipment extra.
That's great.
Well for us.
And I'm glad that we were able to have this kind of cooperation with the other communities. Thank you.
Questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Next item, G4, consider first reading of an amendment to Chapter 46 in the Canton Township Code of Ordinances regarding the Youth Tobacco Act 167 of 2022.
Madam Supervisor, I move to introduce a first reading of an amendment to Chapter 46 of the Canton Township Code of Ordinances and to schedule a second reading for October 11, 2022.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Snyderman. An amendment is being requested in the Canton Township Code of Ordinances pertaining to Chapter 46, Article 4, Division 1, Section 46 through 505 to change the legal age of purchasing of or possessing tobacco, vapor, or alternate nicotine products from 18 to 21. Director Bau, do you want to add anything?
Only thing I have to add, this will help us be in compliance with House Bill 5166, which was enacted by the state in July.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Stephen?
Will it change at all the work that we do to go and ensure that our businesses are complying? No.
Won't change how we handle business. We'll use the same decoys at the appropriate age, though.
Okay, thank you.
They changed the age to 21. I had no idea that happened.
July 21st of 22, but I believe the federal government addressed it in 2019.
Oh, it's been that long. I guess we had a global pandemic. We were thinking about other things. Okay.
Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item G5, consider first reading of an amendment to Chapter 4. Oops, we already did that one. Sorry, I didn't proceed. Consider concept development, assessment, and design for Canton Town Square at Cherry Hill Village.
Madam Supervisor, I move to approve the contract and award a purchase order to OHM in an amount not to exceed $110,000 for the concept development, assessment, and design for the Canton Township, the Canton Town Square at Cherry Hill Village, and to approve the attached budget amendment.
Support.
Sorry.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Brzezinski. Steve, okay. Canton Township and Wayne County are working together to revitalize the Cherry Hill Village neighborhood in Canton Township utilizing ARPA funding. These investments into the community will improve the quality of life for residents, increase property values, grow the tax base, and spur small and medium-sized business development in Canton. Fundamental to this revitalization is the creation of the Canton Town Square at Cherry Hill Village. The Canton Town Square will feature the Village Square Park, Village Arts Factory campus, including the creation of Factory Park on the undeveloped 14 acres behind the factory, Preservation Park improvements, leisure services programming, partnership for the arts and humanities events, open-air dining, restaurants, breweries, and a better connected sidewalk and trail system, wayfinding, parking improvements, and investments in Canton's historical assets. The funding requested for this part of the process in creating the Canton Town Square is $110,000. Deputy Supervisor Joseph, do you have anything to comment on this?
No, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions? Summer?
Quick question. Does the timeline of the 12 to 14 weeks that the study will be completed match up with Wayne County's deadline for funding a project like this?
We hope so, yes. It's difficult to predict what Wayne County might do, but by all accounts, we're taking care of the things that we need to take care of on our end, and are working closely with the county in the development of this plan. And we think we've got a good partner in Wayne County, and it's going to allow us to leverage some of these funds in a way that will make important investments into Canton. Yeah, so we're excited about this project.
I think this is a great plan. I'd love to see it when it's all finalized. And I have always been really interested in seeing the development of Cherry Hill Village, and I think this would be great for that. So.
Yeah, the timing is, right now, the county hasn't even gone through their first round yet. We're in the second round. So hopefully that should happen the first round should happen within the next 2 weeks, wasn't it? Didn't they say?
It'll be whenever the county acts.
Yeah, that's true. I shouldn't speak for the county, right?
Nobody ever made $1 million predicting when the Wayne County would prove something.
Yeah, Stephen?
I would just like to say that I'm excited for this process to kick off. For those of you that have been working on it and in depth, I thank you for that. I'm interested in how the process will roll out and being a part of it. I think when I first ran for office in 2012, I think revitalizing Cherry Hill Village was on my campaign literature, and it was a goal of mine, and I know it's been a goal of everyone here in this room. So I'm excited that we're finally taking an in-depth look at this, and I'm for the people who live in that area, who have lived in a community that had a lot of promise but has not always delivered on that promise, and also for the greater Canton community. I think it's going to be a good thing.
Else? Michael?
One, I'm really excited about working with Tony Slanik because I think he's really just got a great reputation, and anybody who has worked with him on any other project has nothing but positive things to say about him. My brief interactions with him, I was absolutely blown away. I think one important thing that he changed, and if you look at the RBA itself, is he initially realized that there was more to be done to bring the township into Cherry Hill Village and to combat the kind of disassociation people have with Cherry Hill Village, and that's why the project was renamed the Town Square as opposed to the Village Square. It's the Town Square at Cherry Hill Village to really combat the parochial view that we typically have, especially in Southeast Michigan. You look at cities versus, for decades it's been city versus suburb. We routinely define ourselves by what we're not. and we reject the notion that our fates are linked. And what's cool about why the county got involved in this project, and I think why they submitted to the state for their Main Street project, is because if we're gonna survive and thrive, we have to start acknowledging how connected we all are, and that starts with having a town square.
Anyone else? What's cool about this project is that if anyone visits Totten Park in Westland, he designed that also. So you can kind of see some of his work there as well as online. And he was showing us some of the work that he had done where you're actually going to be able to, when he's done, like you're walking through the street and you'll be able to see it. So it's going to be pretty cool for us to be able to really understand this town square in Canton. Okay, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item G6, consider Foia Appeal.
Prefer not to make a motion if you're all right with that, based on
Sure.
the cadence through which we conducted our previous Foia appeal, which is, I think, our first Foia appeal we've ever done as a board.
So, let's see. Well, do we need a motion?
But to make a motion or?
I can,
But there's no model resolution, right?
there is. I found
Yeah,
it.
the model resolution is to deny the appeal, so
Okay.
instead I would much rather have the supervisor start off and explain what we would
Oh,
be
I see.
discussing.
Okay, then we'll make the motion.
Starting out with a model resolution for an appeal feels
Right.
Guess
a
we
little,
read all
a
of
little
them.
unfair to the applicant.
Read all of them.
Perfect.
So on September 8th, 2022, the township received a FOIA appeal from Prime Site Media LLC regarding the status of a FOIA and the request for a deposit. The attached appeal was received by the FOIA coordinator. We are asking the board to consider denying this in two parts. First, the township is permitted to charge a fee for public record search and for making copies if documents require redaction before inspection based on the current FOIA. Secondly, the township did not deny the request, as was alleged, and correctly informed the person that the township would need a deposit because a fee can be charged for the search location, examination, or redaction copying of documents for inspection. Deputy Supervisor, do you want to comment on that at all?
No.
Any questions from the boards or comments? Kate?
So it's my understanding that the person or company wanted to come in to look at the documents, but due to the need for redaction, we were going to charge a fee for that because of the time involved in having to do that work. And it looks like this person doesn't want to pay that fee. Is that right?
Correct, is that right, Joe? They were basically given an estimate of how much it would cost?
Yes, that's correct.
So we never denied the FOIA.
Correct.
Okay. They just don't want to pay the fee.
Correct.
They are under the belief that we are legally not allowed to provide, to assess a fee for the
Right.
redaction of inspected documents.
Right, because I guess the reasoning is that they're not receiving a copy of it. But the work still has to be done, and people in your department still have to make a copy, right? That's redacted for this person to inspect?
Yeah, I can't say why they don't believe we can charge that fee. It's contrary to the law. Their position is
Right.
contrary to the law, practice, and case law. So I have no idea. I mean, I assume, yeah, they don't want to pay that fee. But yes, it would require, more than likely not my department, but it would be a combination of
Okay.
the request, the department that has the records, and I believe are they planning documents, or is it?
What, the total cost you're looking for?
The documents that were requested were, what were they trying to see?
Does not state here. Oh, there was a FOIA attached.
It's Prime Site Media LLC, and they are requesting.
Oh, it's about signs. So yeah, probably planning.
Yeah, so this would be planning, yeah, so planning documents, signed documents, so, we have to go through those anytime there's intellectual property, which there would be if anything's signed off on by a planner or potentially signed off on by a planner or an architect. We need to redact trade secrets in accordance with the copyright law. So they can come in, they can visually inspect, they can make reproductions, but that information needs to be redacted. And that's, we work for the people, and when outside companies want to come in and have us do excessive work over and above, we tend to say, sure, but you need to reimburse the people, and they don't want to reimburse the people.
Any other questions or comments? So can we have a motion then?
I move to deny the Foia appeal.
Motion made by Trustee Berninski, supported by Trustee Foster. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The next item is G7, which was C4.
Fireworks. Typically, you would read the title.
Sorry, consider authorization. I said the numbers, I forgot to read
You're
the title.
throwing me off. Sorry.
Consider authorization of a permit for fireworks display.
Madam Supervisor, I move to authorize the Canton Township Clerk, myself, to sign the permit for Ace Pyro LLC, authorizing their permission to possess, transport, and display fireworks in Heritage Park on October 14th, 2022. Rain date of October 15th, 2022. I would assume in the event of rain.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Berninski. On behalf of Canton's Leisure Services, Ace Pyro LLC is requesting approval for a fireworks display to take place in Heritage Park on October 14th. Rain date, October 15th. The application has been reviewed by the fire marshal, who confirms compliance with all state and local requirements. For the approval of this permit request, it is for the Light Festival. So, the Festival of Lights, I'm sorry. So, Director Stockline or Hohenberger, do you want to comment on this?
In partnership with our friends in public safety, police and fire, really supporting us for the Festival of Lights celebration that Trustee Ganguly is involved with, helping us partner with the community for the Festival of Lights. Many of the expenses are being covered by our community partners. The funds for the actual fireworks are being taken out of the funds allocated for our, I'm going to draw a blank right now.
Yeah, initiatives.
EI initiative funds that were allocated by the board earlier this year. So that's kind of where we're pulling the funds to cover the cost of the fireworks. And we're certainly looking forward to the fireworks event. This will be the first time we're doing fireworks 2 times in 1 year. So very exciting. Building on the success from last year.
Dr. Stockline, do you want anything to say, or this, your regular permits?
Oh, we just review the permit, and we're comfortable with everything that they've got down on the permit, so
Now, this isn't as big as our Liberty Fest fireworks. It's much smaller.
we're going to be close.
Correct.
It's
And shorter.
It's really small.
Really small.
It's just on, it's at
Much-
the lower level on top of the park.
Much smaller shells and much shorter length. So
Set the expectations low.
that's the
Yeah.
So you can exceed them.
Pardon? 8-minute show? Yeah. So the comparatively, we spend about $30,000 on the Liberty Fest fireworks, and we're spending
Oh, wow.
$6,500 on this show. So that'll give you just kind of a
Tanya, do you want to add anything? About the
No,
festival?
The Leisure Services is doing a great job in partnering with the community members, and the rest of this cost of the celebration is being sponsored or being collected by the different vendors that are going to be there. So I think it's a good partnership between the township and the community. And as a municipality, we would be the first municipality in Michigan to do this.
Yes, this is going to be our second annual one, and other communities are copying of us, by the way, calling our leisure services team, finding out what to do.
Awesome.
Any other comments?
I have a question. Traditionally around this time, right, so this Festival of Lights is going to coincide, at least sort of, or similarly with the religious festival or the Indian festival of Diwali. We almost always get requests from other institutions to do fireworks displays in and around Diwali. Do we know if we're going to get those requests from other groups this year? Has anyone approached us
They
yet?
have not approached us yet. We should probably reach out just to.
Yeah, I'm, in the past, they've always, I should say, they're very late to the game to get those permits in. So if you know of anybody, or if anybody's looking to do that, please get those in sooner than later so that we have the time to review them and we can approve them.
Cool. I just, because in speaking to this, I think there's wisdom in doing this 10 days prior to the kind of accompanying date of Diwali's. You know, I absolutely love fireworks on the 4th of July. I don't necessarily, as an owner of 3 dogs and having had 2 children during the COVID pandemic, I don't necessarily love people ripping off fireworks like 7 days every night at 11:30 at night prior to the 4th of July and then 7 days after the 4th of July, although I do love my freedoms. And so I like that you've got this kind of 10-day buffer, if you will. So like, what's cool about Diwali, because we've approved fireworks displays for the various temples, a lot of times members of the public will say, why are fireworks going off? Because it's an obscure thing to have fireworks go off on a Tuesday in October. And people will always say, oh, this is why. This is the kind of holiday that accompanies this celebration. And the public, what's interesting is you know, because you see a lot of people complain on social media about the fireworks displays all throughout June and July. I've never really seen anyone complain once they are like, oh, okay, cool. That's what that's for. It's educational, it's interesting, people understand the community a little bit better, and it's isolated. And so I think that's the cool thing about this event is, you know, people get a little bit wild in July with the fireworks and sometimes get a little bit dangerous with them. But these scheduled displays that are done at an appropriate time in accordance with our ordinance tend to be greeted well by the community. So I think this is a great event, and I'm pretty excited about it. And you know, maybe those institutions that typically want to do their own displays will want to come to this.
Keep in mind, too, we typically do fireworks just as it's getting dark. In October, it gets dark much earlier.
Much earlier.
So those
Before
fireworks
bedtime.
displays will be before bedtime. So for the younger children that may not be able to stay out till dark at Liberty Fest, this is an opportunity to have the younger kids come out and see the fireworks display. So that's kind of a nice thing about that time of year.
Doing your job well, Greg, advocating for promoting the event.
Any other questions or comments? Great, looking forward to it. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item G8, consider approving a memorandum of understanding between the Charter Township of Canton and the Plymouth Canton Community School District for school resource officers.
Right. Madam Supervisor, I move to approve the proposed memorandum of understanding between the Charter Township of Canton and the Plymouth Canton Community Schools District for the placement of 3 school resource officers at the district's main high school campus.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Braninsky. The Police Department is proposing a memorandum of understanding between the Charter Township of Canton and the Plymouth Canton Community School District for the placement of 3 school resource officers at the district's 3 high schools. just to let everybody know, this has gone back and forth between us and their school board for months now, and Director Bau's been very instrumental in pushing this through and making sure that it's what this township wants, and, you know, to protect everybody. And so Chad, Director Bau, do you want to add anything?
I want to thank Trustee Foster and Trustee Perinsky and yourself, Supervisor. We've went back and forth for actually many years of bringing forth the first MOU and how our school resource officers operate in that unique environment of the school district, and how we protect our children and understand the things that children do on campus, and not treat those situations have to be conscious that children are children. So I think that's what's important when we look at this MOU. And I appreciate the support to get there.
Actually, I want to add a little bit from what you said under the background information that you have in the RBA. So the continued placement of SROs at the Plymouth Canton High School campus fosters a positive relationship between law enforcement and the youth of the community, while lessening the impact of the criminal justice system on students. The partnership also promotes school safety and helps maintain a positive school climate for students, families, and staff. Any other comments, questions? Summer?
I'll just make a comment. Thank you to Chief Baugh for really pushing to get this done and advocating both on, you know, with Kate, Anne Marie, and I, but also with the school district to make sure that this happened. I think this ended up as a great document. As Anne Marie said, we went back and forth several times. It was great to have Kate's input as a former school board member as we were going through the different things within the MOU. But I think this is a great document. It is and it's something that we can all be proud of with the township and the police department and the school district moving forward and working together to promote safety within our community. I will say, as a parent who had a child in the school during the lockdown, I was very happy that Canton Public Safety was there, and you know, and I just think I'm really happy that this is moving forward.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, I'm proud of the work that we all did on this. I'm so thankful to Chad for bringing it to us. You know, it kind of amazes me that this is the first time we've had a document like this, even though we've had SROs in our schools for many years. I've been a resident of Canton for over 20 years, and I don't remember a time when we didn't have SROs there. So this has been a long time coming. I think it helps, you know, better sort of define what the role of the police are in our schools. And I think it will lead to much greater cooperation with the school district and ourselves. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, it really solidifies what the officers are doing now on campus. You know, whether it's diversion or just working with the students to solve problems with the school district. So we appreciate it.
I saw Michael first.
Michael?
Steven wanted to take it, so go for it, Steve.
All right.
Both of you at the same time.
Motion to adjourn. I'm sorry.
We aren't there yet. We're almost there.
Yeah, thank you for the work you all did on this. I think it's important for people to have something to turn to look at and see exactly what the role is of the SRO on our campus. With that in mind, is there anything that's changing that people, families, students, employees might see differently?
Really, from my perspective, I think it's important to really partner with the parents when it becomes a situation that maybe the court might review later. It just solidifies the role of what law is, and also solidifies the role of the police officer in the school district to ensure that our officers are not enforcing school rules. There's a big difference between school rules and a potential criminal violation. So it really helps our employees understand their role, because they're doing some great work up there in their interactions with their children. but make sure they're not enforcing school rules. That's not their role.
Right, Michael?
I remember when we lost Ed Yax, and he had served as a school resources officer at the park. And I anticipated having my own personal feelings about it, but also seeing it ripple through our organization. What I did not anticipate was being able to witness it impact the school community. And it was clear the impact that the SROs have. You know, obviously Ed was special, but SROs in general have in the school community. They touch lots of people's lives, and it feels like there's a need for heightened security now because of the proliferation of gun violence, and we've had racial tensions up at the park as well, right? With the student video last year of a troubled student using racial slurs and making threats on social media, and that doesn't make people feel safe. And what's cool about this MOU and this program is the SRO position in general can kind of bridge that gap between students or young people and law enforcement. If your first interaction with a law enforcement officer is a routine one or a playful one, or and not necessarily a combative one, I think that's, you know, this role is unique, and these individuals can sometimes serve, you know, as role models for a lot of people. And I know they interact with a lot of students on a lot of bases. So I think it's a great program. It's a great program here at Plymouth Canton, and I think the MOU helps clarify that. So I appreciate the work that everybody put towards this. On top of that, you know, I do know that they're bringing in, the Plymouth Canton School District is bringing in dogs that can sniff firearms, and I think that's great. That they're bringing in handlers who can use those dogs, and that is just another layer that's going to help make people feel safe in the school district. And so I think when you take what we're doing with our SROs and you couple it with what we're trying to do, not just with our social worker program that we've implemented, but when you couple that with our diversion program, right, so that we don't always just have a hammer and treat every situation like a nail, and we start really looking at kids on an individual basis and treating them like kids as opposed to criminals, that's huge. And so I am really grateful for the work that we're doing in Canton Township on community policing. It's not being done everywhere else. So thanks.
Any other comments? So I do want to say also that the 3 high schools are in Canton, and I know from the school board members who helped work on this that it was important that it be a model for other understandings. And our Canton police are the only SROs at the park right now. So even though we cover Plymouth and Plymouth Township, we are the only ones that have SROs there. So that's why I'm glad we're showing our leadership there, and we showed our leadership in, you know, creating this MOU. And I know that they really appreciate it. You know, they were really concerned with everything that's happened also. So it's good that we have a good guideline of how we want to work together at the schools. So thank you, Summer and Kate and Chad and school board members, and I know our board members also. But thank you for all your work on this. So there's a motion on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Last item on the agenda is G9, request approval to extend incentive for vaccination against COVID-19 for full and part-time employees.
Madam Supervisor, I move to approve the extension of the incentive for vaccination against COVID-19 for the full-time employees by providing them with 8 hours of PTO time, and for part-time employees to receive a bonus equivalent to 4 hours at their primary job rate upon proof of the second dose of the COVID-19 vaccine and a booster within the last 6 months to the Human Resources Department to continue through March 31st of 2023.
Motion made by Clerk Seeger, supported by Trustee Foster. Last year, the township provided full-time employees with the equivalent of 1 PTO day to offset the accrued time that the employee may have been required to use while recovering from side effects of receiving the COVID-19 vaccination. This PTO day was placed into the employee's bank after proof of the second dose of the vaccine was provided to our Human Resources Department. In an effort to continue to help mitigate the spread of COVID-19, we are requesting the board extend the additional PTO day granted to full-time employees and the incentive for our part-time employees implemented in September 2021. The township is updating the guidance to be in alignment with the CDC. Therefore, upon proof to the Human Resources Department that the employee has received their second dose of the vaccine and a booster within the last 6 months, the township would pay 4 hours to the part-time employee at their current primary job rate, since our part-time employees do not have leave banks. Part-time employees would receive incentive pay after 30 days of employment. We are requesting to extend this benefit to all part-time employees who have not already received the benefit through March 31st, 2023. This is qualified use of ARPA grant funds, of which the board previously authorized $20,000 of these funds to be utilized for this endeavor. There are approximately $15,000 of funds remaining for this purpose. Director Trumbull, do you want to add anything?
Sure. This is just, like the supervisor indicated, a continuation of the benefit that was previously offered. There's a little bit of a change to what the board approved last time. Now the part-time employees do need to be here for 30 days. What we found was happening was some people, they were getting it right when they finished their training and then maybe never actually came and worked a shift. So we wanted to make sure they were on staff for 30 days before we actually paid that out. And then secondly, we wanted to make sure that they had recently received the vaccine because, as you know, the vaccine does not last for a long period of time. So if somebody got it a year and a half ago, that vaccine had worn off. So we really wanted to encourage the vaccines to be more current than previously offered. So those were the two changes. Since the beginning of the year, I think we have paid out about $5,000 in the COVID bonus for the part-time people. So we still had about $15,000 left from the ARPA allocation that the board had previously authorized. So there's money set aside for that.
Great, thank you. Kate?
So just to clarify, is this just extending that, or is it like if a person already was vaccinated but then got a booster, would they qualify, or is it just if they have had their, like, if they haven't already received this incentive?
The RBA, what we're requesting is to new employees coming into the township, not for existing employees receiving a booster.
Okay.
Questions? All right. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a public comment. This is a 3-minute comment period. Let me see if anyone is online. Oh, our attendees have hung up. Okay, anybody in the room for public comment? Anyone for public comment? Come on up to the podium, please.
George Miller. It's been brought up to the township trustees here last 6 months, from Palmer Road to Ford Road. The storm sewers are plugged up, the curb, and it's grown up, the weeds have grown up over the curb. I'd like to know when you guys are going to work with the county and get it done. Next thing is Van Born Road, from Canton Center Road approximately to Hannon Road. That whole area floods when it rains. There's the brim on the road through the years. The water can't drain down in the ditch. The tree program, I hope we can be a little more selective on planting trees so they're not underneath the power lines and grow underneath them. So when there's a windstorm, it goes out. Then you have to come over here to the summit and stay that night or somewhere else. Maybe we could be a little more selective where we plant them, not underneath the power lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room? Nope, just our employees. No other public comments? Okay, let's move on to board comments. Tanya, do you want to start?
I have nothing to add. Just, I got my COVID booster 2 weeks ago, and since they're going up again. It would be great incentive that we just talked about for our employees.
Thanks, Summer.
I would like to wish Deputy Chief Craig Wilshire congratulations on his retirement. And I got to know Craig a bit on what used to be called the Canton Response to Hate Crimes Coalition, which is now the Coalition for Inclusive Communities. But I always really liked Craig, and I wish him well on his retirement from Canton Township.
Thank you, Michael.
The township has received roughly 19,000 applications for an absentee ballot, and the clerk's office will be mailing them out in 2 days. That's this Thursday. So voters can expect to receive those absentee ballots in their mailbox the first week of October.
Great. Thank you. Stephen?
I just want to wish everyone in the community a happy autumn and get out to those cider mills and eat some donuts.
Thanks, Kate.
So I don't think we mentioned before at our last meeting, but September 15th to October 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month, so I wanted to mention that, and hope everyone can celebrate, go out and have some good food or listen to some great music and celebrate National Hispanic Heritage Month. I also happened to see on a calendar, actually I was at physical therapy today, and they have a little calendar that on their bulletin board, and it said, and maybe Michael knows about this, that today is voter registration day.
National Voter Registration Day, I believe we celebrated last Tuesday, but
The 4th Tuesday, whenever that is.
I mean, there's a day. There's always a day. Yeah, September 19th.
Well, then that calendar at
They are-
physical therapy was
Those
wrong.
calendars are notorious liars.
Oh, wow. Anyway, hope everybody got registered if they weren't.
September 20th, which is last Tuesday.
Okay.
Summer was correct from the beginning.
Okay,
Knows that date.
yeah. Wow, okay. Well, anyway, go
Throw out
out
that
and have
calendar.
some good food, maybe some Latin food or something.
Anyone, I'm sorry, any of the staff members? Deputy, have any comments?
I got two things. Our open house will be on October 15th from 11 to 2 p.m. So it's Fire Prevention Month for October. And alongside with the Fire Prevention Month, as last year, we allowed the firefighters to wear the cancer awareness shirts. So they got the new shirts for this year. So you'll see them starting Saturday wearing these new T-shirts, and they kind of got the new logo on the
Oh,
back.
that's nice.
So
That is nice.
they get one month out of the year to wear T-shirts and be free.
That fundraiser over, do you know?
What's that?
That was a part of a fundraiser. Did they?
Yeah, but
is
I
that
believe you
done?
can still do that because they're still raising money for that the whole month. Yep. So,
I was going to get one of those shirts and I forgot to. But it's not too late.
Last year, they were all pink, weren't they?
some of them had pink and some had blue, so, but it'll be uniform this year, and they'll also have some long sleeve ones that they can wear because it's October, so.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? And we have Halloween events we're all planning for. So I also wanted to thank all the staff for working on the blessings rezoning that we spoke of earlier and going along with everything that we worked on. So thank you very much for all your hard work. I know Patrick already left, and Sarah will have to tell them also. Also, Rosh Hashanah, wasn't it? So we're just yesterday and today, so happy Rosh Hashanah, Stephen.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All right, great. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Sequist and quickly supported by Trustee Foster. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Nay. Motion passes. We're adjourned.